Hello, and welcome back as we discuss the ancient Egyptian language and hieroglyphics. Now, if the best way you can help this channel to grow and to bring you more great content like this is to hit the subscribe button down in the corner. Today, we are going to introduce you to how to read ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Now, the ancient Egyptian language has hundreds of hieroglyphs. But the good news is, you don't need to memorize most of them. A good portion of them are silent, or what's called determinatives. These are just pictures that help you determine the meaning of a word. But the two that are actually pronounced are called uniliterals and multiliterals. Now, a uniliteral means one literal, or one consonant, or one phoneme. A multiliteral is made up of two or more uniliterals, or phonemes or sounds. Over the next 10 videos, we are going to introduce you to the uniliterals. Now, when we talk about the alphabet, what we're actually talking about is the uniliterals for the most part. These are the sort of the building blocks of the Egyptian vocal system. And there's only 27 of them. Now, in a normal course, we'd pack this all into one class and the student would be left to try to figure out the rest on their own. We're going to take this really, really slow. We are going to introduce you to 4 at one time. So that's why this is spread out over 10 videos. Now, I mentioned in the previous video that the Egyptian alphabetic system isn't like English. As I said before, Egyptians got 4 H's, 2 T's, 2 D's, 3 S's, and a bunch of silent characters. And those silent characters are actually consonants. And that's because ancient Egyptian doesn't write out its vowels. A vowel being A, E, I, O, and U. Instead, what Egyptian does is it uses a silent consonant. And we, in English, don't pronounce the silent consonants, we connect it to a vowel. So, for convenience, we'll pronounce a lot of these silent letters like vowels, but we always must be cognizant of the fact that they aren't actually vowels. They're actually consonants. And that they're paired with a vowel at some point. And we're just not sure how they're paired. So, one of the pieces of misinformation that sort of circulates out there when you see, say, tables of the Egyptian alphabet is they're often using these silent characters as if they're vowels, when they're not. And our first hieroglyph we're going to introduce is a prime example of this, which is the vulture. Now, the vulture symbol is sometimes called the aleph because it's somewhat similar to the Hebrew aleph. Hebrew has silent letters, English doesn't. But it's really not like the Hebrew aleph either. It's something that's sort of unique to Egyptian. Now, when we draw the vulture, we usually start with the beak. And we trace it down the back. Then we draw the body and the feet. And an important characteristic of the vulture hieroglyph is that it's got a square, the back of the head is square. And this is a really important detail because there's another hieroglyph in Egyptian, that's of a vulture, that has a round head, that has a completely different meaning and reading. Now, when we pronounce the Egyptian aleph or vulture, the vulture isn't pronounced, we're going to pronounce it as if it was a short A, an ah. But the way we transliterate it is sort of looks like a 3. Now it's really 2 modified C's stacked on top of each other, but English speakers will look at it and say, well, this looks more like a 3. Well, that's okay. But we're going to see this aleph symbol come up a lot. Now, in Middle Egyptian, the vulture was silent. But in Late Egyptian, it sort of takes on more of an R or an L sound. Now, when you read Egyptian language can be read from right to left, left to right, top to bottom. So it can be read in 3 directions. So the question often remains, how do you know which way to read an Egyptian character? The answer is, you generally read into the face. There is one exception to this one which we won't get into, but most of the time you're going to want to read into the face. And the vulture has a face, so you typically read into the face of the vulture. So that's our first character, which is the vulture. And we're going to pronounce it as ah. The second character is the reed leaf. Now, to draw the reed leaf, you draw the stem, curving it at the top. Then you draw a straight line, and then you connect the 2 lines. The letter is transliterated like a lowercase I, except you put a comma instead of a dot. In some European Egyptology literature, you'll sometimes see a J used instead, a lowercase j used. But it means the same thing. And the way we're going to pronounce this, again, this is a silent consonant that we are going to pair with a letter I to produce a long I or a double E sound, as in reed, seed. And you can remember this when you see the reed leaf. E, the double E in reed. The third letter is the double reed leaf. Now, this is going to probably throw you, but the way you write this thing is you draw one reed leaf, and then you draw a second one right beside it. That's the double reed leaf. But it's transliterated not as a double I, but as a Y. And it is pronounced as the consonant Y, as in a Y sound, as in yoke or yawn. Now, this gives you a reminder here that we're not actually dealing with vowels, but consonants. Just as we sometimes pronounce them as vowels just to make it easier. Now, the fourth character is the oblique strokes. To draw this, you're just going to draw 2 backslashes side by side. Like the double reed leaf, the letter is also transliterated as a Y. And it's pronounced the same way as the double reed leaf, which is that yawn or y sound. Now, even though the reed leaf and the oblique strokes are written differently, they are in fact the same letter and are synonymous. Now, actually, we have the same thing in English that most of you have never noticed, which is that there are 2 forms of the lowercase letter g. There's one that's written kind of like a hook, and then there's one that's written like a backwards loop. And you'll see this if you see written things in printed text. Sometimes they'll use one G, sometimes they'll use the other lowercase g. But we just accept that they're the same letter because we're used to seeing it. Well, the Egyptians were the same way. They saw the double reed leaf, they saw the oblique strokes. To them, it was the same Y. Now, we've just covered the first 4 letters in ancient Egyptian. So it's time for your first word. And we are going to use the vulture character to make our first word. So we take our vulture and we add a single stroke above the shoulder. Now, when you see this single stroke combined with a character, it usually means that the character is supposed to be read as the picture shown. So in this case, the word is pronounced ah like the character, but it means vulture, like the picture. And that's what the stroke does. It converts. It's a determinative that converts the picture, the alphabet, into its pictographic value. Now, when we add a E sound to the end of it, a reed leaf to the back of that, it becomes something else. Because the reed sound, the E sound, means either me or my. It's a pronominal suffix. It's a pronoun. So when we add a reed to the end of that vulture, we get a short phrase that means my vulture. Ah, e. Ah, vulture, e, my. Ah, e, my vulture. And thank you very much for watching.